the whole.
A pleasant good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, for those of you who are joining us this morning for the opposition's midweek press conference. As you are aware, there are a number of burning issues, national issues, critical issues that are affecting Trinidad and Tobago at this time. And joining me this morning for the opposition's midweek press conference is none other than the opposition Shadow Minister for Labour, MP for Couva South, Rudy Indarsingh. So this morning, before I go into my bit in terms of the issues that are confronting the public utilities sector, I would like to introduce the Member of Parliament for Couva South, the opposition Shadow for Labour, MP Rudy Indarsingh.
A pleasant good morning, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, members of the media. This morning, I will be dealing with the report of the Commission of Inquiry into the tragic events which occurred at the facilities owned by Padarath Fuel Trading Company Limited, located at Berth 6, Pointe-à-Pierre. And now the report has been in the public domain. It is important that we focus on a number of issues as it relates to Padarath, the role of the occupational safety and health, and given recent events which have transpired at the ArcelorMittal Plant 2, I will be focusing on the state of affairs as it relates to the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. And the United National Congress is of the firm conviction that this is not the end of the journey for the relatives, friends, and families of the late Faisal Kurban, Rishi Nagesa, Yusuf Henry, Kazim Ali Jr., and the lone survivor, Christopher Budram. We are of the opinion that the struggle for true justice has now only begun. The struggle must be a never-ending one because the UNC has been in the forefront calling for justice to be carried out and to be served. And today, we call upon the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, his cabinet ministers, the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Stuart Young, and the Minister of Labour, Stephen McClatchy, to end their deafening silence on the 52 recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry. Because this report, if you read this report, it turns your stomach. I, being involved in the trade union movement and representing the interests of labor for 19 years of my life before this incarnation, I was left traumatized. I was left pained at the events that was allowed to transpire at Padarath. And you see, we must never forget, I would just want to read very briefly from the letter that was sent by the Chairman, King's Council, to Her Excellency, Christine Kangaloo, the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Leaving aside any blame one can help, but be deeply moved by the tragedy of it all. I, for one, cannot forget the words of 11-year-old Aliyah Henry. When I got word of my father stuck in a pipe at Padarath, I froze to know that but I prayed that my father and his friends will be safe. And she prayed for a miracle. I went down to Paria with my mother, praying for a miracle for my father and his friends. However, the same did not happen. And we must understand why this did not happen, because this was not an accident, as I said, and now it is in the public domain. I think that it is important to read, and the public has a right to know, because I do not know up till today how many of the citizens of this country and stakeholders have familiarized themselves with the contents of this report. Very quickly, I want to read, and I'm reading from, for example, page 21, that the permit to work system required Indarsingh to be competent to execute the job or to supervise its execution. He could do neither, but he should not have been asked. There is no doubt that this was the kind of job where, in the absence of having in-house expertise, an outside expert independent contractor should have been brought in as the applicant. There was room in Paria's own budget for the works to be done. It was improper to appoint Farah as the dive supervisor. At that time, he was not a trained dive supervisor. And just to amplify why a miracle on behalf of the relatives could not have occurred, from page 28, Piper agreed that he would only sanction a rescue if he knew the conditions in the pipe, and that could only be achieved with a camera. Therefore, until he had sought footage, there was no rescue. The limited footage that was obtained did not arrive until well after midnight. Too much time was lost trying to get the camera footage. No consideration was given to the alternative, any alternative. To give no consideration at all to any alternative was irresponsible. All realistic options should have been considered. Even if the camera revealed that which they sought, no plan to carry out a rescue has been put in place. No attempt was made to engage with the country's best experts in commercial diving, which had arrived at the site. Piper closed his mind to any alternatives without even hearing them. We regret that as a serious breach of Paria's duty under the incident command system. And I could go on and on and on to tell you why the relatives, this 11-year-old child who was hoping for a miracle that her father would come out alive, could not have gotten that miracle because of the sheer incompetence of Paria's management and board. And when you read it, it sickens you to the core. Paria breached its duty of care to the divers employed by LMCS, and the breach of duty caused the deaths of the 4 divers and wrecked the life of Christopher Budram. Paria is now a crime scene, and we must ask ourselves the question this morning, who is Paria? Paria is not the building and the logos in it. Paria is a company that is a child and is a product of the People's National Movement government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. Trinidad and Tobago, we must be logical and we must be responsible. The facts are clear that Paria was created as the successor company when the cabinet headed by Dr. Rowley, took the decision to close down Paria and created this child, to close down Petrotrin, and created this child called Paria. It set the stage for the deaths of these 4 divers and wrecking the lives of the lone survivor, because the overall policy of the government was to remove oversight and the role of a union in upholding health and safety in the work environment. And that is why we have to analyze, as I said, the roles of the persons involved. That is, one, the Prime Minister and his cabinet in the creation of Paria, and the role of the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Stuart Young. He was on the compound at Paria between the 26th of February to the 28th of February. And who does the board of Paria report to? The board reports to the line minister, and the board is appointed by the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. Who is the board? Who is in charge of the board of Paria? The board is headed by the Gulfin body, the Gulfin friend of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, in the person of Newman George. Did Stuart Young and Newman George and the board ensure that the families who were traumatized, not knowing where their relatives were in the pipeline, hoping for a miracle, did the ministers and the board provide a cup of coffee, a Crick's biscuit, a tent, a chair, a toilet for the families to relieve themselves? The only action that was done by Paria was to prevent or to use the presence of the heavily armed Coast Guard to intimidate and prevent a rescue mission being mounted by the colleagues or the community of colleagues of the divers who were trapped. This coming Saturday, when they open Balizé House and they tell you to wear red and come to the rededication ceremony and the reopening of Balizé House, we want to tell you and tell the country that the nation must never forget that the red of Balizé must be likened to the red blood of the 4 divers who suffocated in the pipeline. That is the legacy of Dr. Rowley and the PNM. As I said, Dr. Rowley and his government set the stage when they took the decision to kill Petrotrin and create Paria. And Paria was even so distasteful in its conduct during the Commission of Inquiry's hearings. They accused the independent commissioners of apparent bias, and we could go on and on and on. And in any other serious society, the board would have been sent packing by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet in any other jurisdiction. And today, because I have to ask the board of directors, and the country must get very familiar with them, because sometimes we sweep it under the carpet. Newman George, Eustace Narcis, Fayed Ali, Peter Clark, Avi Chedi, and Riza Salim. If they had any decency and any iota of integrity based on the contents of this report, they would have tendered their resignation with immediate effect, or the Prime Minister would have, and the Cabinet would have sent them packing. And the question has to be asked for the entire country. The UNC is asking, why is the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago shielding this board based on the horrific revelations and what we have read, and what transpired during the deliberations of this Commission of Inquiry, and the 52 recommendations which have been made. These are the key questions that have to be answered. And we in the UNC will not surrender. We will not lie down. And we have to ask the question, in addition to the board not being fired or the board members not having the decency to resign because they continue to collect board fees for the last 2 years. And reliable information is coming to us because we have not heard whether Colin Piper, Mushtaq Mohammed, Catherine Balkisoon, Michael Wee, Paul Yearwood, Randolph Archibald, and so on, whether their contracts have been renewed, because they are all contract employees at Paria. This has been 2 years now, approximately 2 years in February, and we are asking and we are calling upon Newman George and his board and the Minister of Energy to tell us whether all the players whose actions have been found to be wanting and questionable by the Commission of Inquiry, whether their contracts have been renewed by Paria board and management, and up till today, not one damn cent for the families of the deceased divers, while they continue to live high and dry, hunky-dory, and it's apparently business as usual at Paria. And that turns me now, I want to move away from that issue to focus on the conduct of the Occupational Safety and Health Agency as it relates to what transpired at Paria. And I want to read from page 30 of the report under the broad heading 24. The evidence of the officers of the OSH agency are examined, and in particular, the evidence of the deletion. I want Trinidad and Tobago to listen carefully, and members of the media. The deletion of words from an incident brief form which recorded the view of Dion Lawrence, a then Occupational Safety and Health Inspector, present on the 25th of February, that there was no clear personnel in charge. There was no clear personnel in charge of the rescue efforts being conducted, and no incident command system in place. This is clearly exemplified in page 297 of the report. And one has to ask the question, why was this incident brief form doctored, the contents all altered? And today we are calling upon the Minister of Labor, who has the line responsibility for the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. He must clear the air whether there was a political conspiracy, whether there was a conspiracy or a plot to suppress the report that was supposed to come out from the Occupational Safety and Health Agency as it relates to their investigations. As I said, why was the incident finding and observation changed? And the Minister of Labor cannot continue to remain silent. And I will deal with his conduct later on in terms of the state of affairs currently that is existing at OSHA, because on page 297 of the report, and I want to read directly from page 297. For the myriad of reasons spelled out in detail above, we regard both PARI and LMCS to be in potential breach as of a number of the general duties set out under the OSHA Act. We have seen, as all parties have, the document entitled Preliminary Report from the OSH Authority and the agency dated the 29th of April 2022, in which they make a number of provisional findings. We were told that a full report may well have been concluded whilst the Commission of Inquiry is going about its work. But we have not been provided with a copy, neither have we seen it. Where is this report that was conducted by the OSH agency into the deaths of the 4 divers? And we have good reason to believe that political pressure, a conspiracy, a plot to suppress the true findings was carried out, and the government of Trinidad and Tobago cannot continue, the Prime Minister cannot continue to remain silent. The Minister of Labor cannot continue to remain silent. Because you see, members of the media, this government has a poor track record when it comes to bringing reports to the fore. Where's the report into sexual harassment of a cabinet minister? Where's that report? Where the committee was convened with much fanfare by the Prime Minister. The report was suppressed. The report was sent to the Office of the Attorney General for sanitization. Where's the report into Naikwan, the first explosion? Where's the report into the death of Alan Lane Ramkisoon? All we are hearing is that these are private entities and the report cannot be made or come to the fore or into the public domain. When the Occupational Safety and Health Act is on the statute books, it is on the law books of Trinidad and Tobago. So what we are being told by members of this government is that the laws of Trinidad and Tobago will not be held or upheld in the interest of the citizens of the country. And if there is not a finalized report, one has to ask the question, because recently we heard from the Occupational Safety and Health Executive Director, Carolyn Sancho, where she told the country that offenses were filed against Paria at the industrial court. What yardstick, what mechanisms? If there is a preliminary report, nobody cannot find the finalized report. It is not in the public domain. The UNC has raised this on a number of occasions in the parliament and outside of the parliament. And up till today, the minister cannot bring into the public domain the final report, the signed off report of the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. Then I think they owe us an explanation in terms of where is the final report, the signed off report, because we must never forget when the accident occurred, the then chief inspector, one Mr. Shevon Ali, he resigned. Was political pressure brought upon him? He did not sign the preliminary report. These are things Trinidad and Tobago must never forget. And was he asked, or was the fact that he saw the incident brief form of the then Occupational Safety and Health Inspector in the person of Dion Lawrence being doctored, and as a result of him being fully aware that this incident brief form was doctored, he exercised his conscience and resigned, or was political pressure brought upon him, and the only way out he saw was to resign from the operations of the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. This is a matter of urgent national importance. And when they filed the matters at the industrial court, did they request an expedition hearing for determination of these matters? these are things that we cannot continue to remain silent upon and say it is business as usual, because $16 million of taxpayers' money have been expended as it relates to this commission of inquiry, and we cannot continue to exist in this realm and fashion. And in addition to that, I want to, because the government and the ministers, whether it is the Minister of Labor, the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, and the Prime Minister, must tell us where is their political will, or what political will they display to implement the 52 recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry to ensure that such a tragedy does not reoccur in the workplace. Is the cabinet which appoints the board of PARIA, one of the recommendations without accepting liability is that there should be immediate compensation for the families. Is the cabinet prepared to advise the board of PARIA, Mr. Newman George, and the board that is collecting board fees for the last 2 years, and the management of PARIA, who have been collecting their salaries for the last 2 years, are they prepared to advise the board to pay attention and to immediately implement this recommendation? And finally, I want to address the issue of the state of affairs at the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. Because you see, within recent times, we have to ask the question, it is very clear that at the workplace, it has been turned into what we might term a killing field across the work environment in this country. One only has to look that there have been approximately 9 deaths since 2019, including the 4 divers, Alan Lane, Ramkisoon at Naikwan, Kernat Yen at Wassa, and the latest being Rossi Mansingh, who died as a result of being engaged on the former ArcelorMittal site by the TT Iron Steel Company Limited. And what really inflamed me this morning is when I read from an article in the Newsday, and it said the Minister of Labor, that OSH, under the broad headline, OSH not responsible. And it says, and I am quoting the minister saying, OSH does not have responsibility in the workplace. If somebody does something at that plant that results in injury or death, under the OSHA Act, the company has to empower the OSH authority as soon as something like that happens. This is hogwash. This is unadulterated hogwash coming from a Minister of Labor who I think must apologize to the family of Rossi Mansingh and all the persons who have died under his watch as minister. The OSH agency is a creature of the Occupational Safety and Health Authority, and it clearly states the role of the Occupational Safety and Health Agency as it relates to enforcement of the Act. What the minister has done is that he has given employers an open license to break the law with impunity, and then tell you when people die or people are injured on the job, then you call in the OSH agency. This is hogwash. It reeks of incompetence, arrogance, and if he does not apologize, I think the Prime Minister should relieve him. He should be fired for his incompetence and his lack of empathy. Any Minister of Labor, understanding if they have read the contents of this Occupational Safety and Health Act, will tell you that the Occupational Safety and Health Act sole responsibility is to enforce and to ensure that a proper health and safety work environment is upheld in the workplace. And the only way it can be upheld in the workplace is through enforcement. So what we have seen through the actions of the Minister of Labour is the continued incompetence, chaos, and confusion which continues to exist. In 2022, we were told that there were 88 vacancies. Have these vacancies been filled? Have inspections been conducted by health and safety inspectors in workplaces? Have risk assessments been done? Have safety audits been done? And if, when they have been done by the officers of the OSH agency, what have they done to ensure that employers are complying to the clauses of the Occupational Safety and Health Act? Certainly, the actions seem to be sending a very clear signal that they have found to be wanting. Deaths continue to occur. The workplace is now a killing field under Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and his Minister of Labour. And today, while we will continue to champion the interests of the families and champion that journey for true justice and accountability on behalf of the deceased divers, as I said, today is the beginning of a journey. We cannot treat this as business as usual. The United National Congress will not roll over as it relates to the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry, and we will stand on the side of justice, fair play, and equality, not only for the families of the deceased divers, but all workers and stakeholders who continue to be oppressed by the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, who continues to break the laws of the land and violate the Constitution of this country virtually on every front. With this in mind, I want to thank you, and I now want to turn you over to my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Princestown, the shadow with responsibility for public utilities, who certainly will provide you with his perspective and insight as it relates to the state of affairs. It seems to be one of collapse at the telecommunication services of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, MP Indarsingh. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, I want to deal frontally with a matter that has found its place once again in the public domain as it relates to the cyber attack on TSCT just a few short months ago. I also want to take the opportunity to point out that had it not been for the United National Congress, the opposition members of Parliament in the House of Representatives, namely my colleagues, the member for Couva North, Ravi Ratiram, the member for Couva South, MP Rudy Indarsingh, and myself, MP for Princestown, not ventilating these issues both inside and outside of the Parliament, Trinidad and Tobago would not have had the benefit of knowing exactly what occurred when we had the cyber attack, but also the data breach that we saw. The government has engaged through the minister and the board at TSCT a naked and vulgar attempt to hide the truth from citizens that their data was out on the road when the cyber attack occurred. As I said, these lies and deceptions, it's often said, oh, what a tangle web we weave when we first set out to deceive. And clearly, by the actions of the Minister of Public Utilities and the board of TSCT, there was an attempt to deceive the population by suppressing an MP. Indarsingh spoke to you earlier about what we are seeing at PARI and what we are seeing through the OSH agency. The suppressing of vital information. Why? Because it exposes the incompetence of the government in terms of handling critical matters, matters that have costed people their lives in this country. The government continues to suppress the information because of the political fallout that they fear from dealing frontally with the challenges ahead. And this morning, we have more questions than answers. But we have a Minister of Public Utilities and you have a board that is ducking and running from answering the critical questions that needs answers. And as I said, as each day passes, there appears to be more and more questions rather than answers coming from the Minister of Public Utilities as well as the board. Before I go into the substance of the questions that needs to be answered and what we have seen happen at the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament in the last couple of days, I want to contextualize the environment in which we find ourselves in terms of the matters that are affecting TSCT at this moment. You have several players in the public domain. One, Lisa Agard, having been fired as the Chief Executive Officer of TSCT, having been thrown under the bus, and it appears as though all the blame is now being placed on Ms. Agard. You have one, Kamal Georges, who is, interestingly enough, the Senior Manager of Environmental and Reputation Management. Senior Manager of Environment and Reputation Management at a time when the reputation of the senior manager, touch base before I go into this so we contextualize the players that are involved in this matter. Where did Ms. Lisa Agard come from? She just didn't suddenly arrive at TSCT. Ms. Agard has had a very colorful and interesting history at TSCT. But I want to fast forward it a bit in terms of when Ms. Agard was part of overseeing the acquisition of Massey Communications by TSCT. Lisa Agard was the chief architect of that acquisition of Massey Communications by TSCT, an acquisition that saw taxpayers doling out over $265 million. I want to throw your minds back. When the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, stood in the parliament somewhere around 2018 when this acquisition was being made, and she frontally asked the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, whose corporation sold, about the acquisition of Massey Communications by TSCT under very suspicious circumstances. What did the Prime Minister tell the country? The Prime Minister said, I had no idea. I had no involvement. The cabinet was not told. There was no consultation. And therefore, we do not know anything about the Massey Communications acquisition by TSCT. Similarly, the Minister of Finance, on the same day, Minister Colm Imbert got up and he told the Parliament the very same thing that the Prime Minister said. They had no idea what was happening at TSCT in terms of this $265 million acquisition of Massey Communications. The chief architect being who? Lisa Agard. I also want to throw your minds back to Kamal George's appearance at TSCT. This featured heavily in the Parliament when we filed the necessary questions. I believe it was MP Indarsingh, interestingly enough, and myself. When we stood in the Parliament and we said, what was the criteria? How was he selected? And very little detail or information was given until, you know what? Because of the opposition, we filed a freedom of information to get the details, and it was like pulling teeth. But the reason that I raise these issues before I go to the substantive issue of the questions that we need answered is that the PNM has always had a history of political prostitution of senior positions within state enterprises, senior positions in the government, rewarding friends, family, and financiers, and those who do their political bidding to get them into office. And that is why I say, what a tangled web we weave when we first set out to deceive. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have a situation where the Minister of Public Utilities has thrown his hands up in the air. I took a motion of privilege to the Parliament after the Minister on November 1st stood up and answered a question saying that there was no data breach. And this was based on information that he had received. This is on the Hansard of the Parliament, where the Minister said on the 30th of October 2023, he received information from TSCT that there was no data breach. He said that on November 1st in the Parliament. 2 days ago, former CEO of TSCT, who has now found her voice because she has been thrown under the bus by the PNM, she has released herself from PIP. She has now found her voice to say that while as CEO, the senior manager of Environment and Reputation Management, one Kamal Georges, had put together correspondence indicating that yes, there was in fact a data breach. And if we were to take the words of the former Chief Executive Officer of TSCT, Lisa Agard, the chain of command then means that that information is passed on to the board, and the board has the fiduciary duty to inform and keep up to date information as it relates to the operations, the security, and the management of TSCT on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes it is necessary from on a minute to minute, an hour to hour, and in a circumstance such as a cyber attack on TSCT, with repercussions such as what we are seeing now in the public domain of data breach, cyber security issues, and so on. The onus, the fiduciary duty, is on the board to keep the minister informed. And I want to focus a bit on that because at the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament just a day or two ago, the board of TSCT, and I want, MP Indarsingh told us earlier, sometimes these board members, they hide behind the blanket of being on the board, and very few people know who they are. But the reason that I have raised who the players are in this entire scenario and attempted to contextualize the issue, I have branded most of them as PNM untouchables. Because while Lisa Agard has been thrown under the bus, the operatives of the People's National Movement, who they have placed in senior positions inside of TSCT and on the board of TSCT, they have not been removed. You would recall when this matter arose, it was the opposition and it was the union that called for the immediate removal of the board. And today we have to ask, why are the PNM untouchables in the management of TSCT and the board of TSCT? Why do they continue to be there today? I saw in today's Guardian editorial, and I want to read 2 paragraphs to you because it seems as though the Guardian too has just found its voice on this matter and on other matters. And I quote, the headline of today's editorial in Trinidad Guardian, Minister must clear air on TSCT affair. It says it is without doubt that TSCT's handling of the matter was nothing short of unethical and unprofessional, especially to its customers who were kept in the dark for almost an entire month before media reports of the attack forced a company response, that it attempted to cleverly shroud aspects of information in its initial statement, only alerted to the fact that the attack was far more grave than it initially let on. It goes on to say, this was what ultimately led to Minister Marvin Gonzalez's erroneous statement in the House and Ms. Agard's firing. It is also not lost on us that Ms. Agard is now finally confirming she was not given a chance to make a defense of herself. So if Ms. Agard was sent packing for such a grievous indiscretion, why are the other individuals involved still within the organization? I want to repeat that line. So if Ms. Agard was sent packing for such a grievous indiscretion, why are the other individuals involved still within the organization? Well, Guardian Media Limited, I have the answer for you. They too are part of the P&M Untouchables. Just like the board. You wondered sometimes how some of your own employees found their way in other positions, in other state agencies. The P&M Untouchables. And this morning I want to share with you the names of those board members. Because I explained to you that these board members have a fiduciary duty. But I'll go on to explain further what motivates some of these people and why the Minister of Public Utilities and the Prime Minister ultimately, who is the head of the cabinet, continue to have these persons remain in the position they are in today, running the affairs of TSCT. Chairman Sean Roach, Wendell Berkeley, Nicole De Freitas, Howard Dottin, Annalene Innes, Ingrid Lashley, Judith Sobian. P&M Untouchables. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to focus a bit on what happened at the Joint Select Committee. And I want to call on Lisa Agard today and the Joint Select Committee, the chairman and the members, to have Ms. Lisa Agard appear before the Joint Select Committee. Ms. Lisa Agard must have a come to Jesus moment to bare her soul and explain to this country how Marvin Gonzalez stood up in the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and told citizens, over 1 million subscribers, LTSTT, that their data was safe and not in the hands of criminal elements. We expressed our concern that the data breach dealt with issues of people's personal information, where you lived, your bank details, your credit card details. It told people what you were buying, from whom you were buying. It was giving, in some instances, the history of your purchases, giving an idea of what your socio-economic background was. And the minister had the responsibility, and this is where it comes, where Ms. Agard must bare her soul and have her come to Jesus moment before the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament. She must say to the Parliament, through the Joint Select Committee, that Minister Marvin Gonzalez, as she said, I believe it was to CNC3 just a few nights ago, that the minister was in receipt of updated information. And it was interesting that at the Joint Select Committee, and you know, sometimes these Joint Select Committees are chaired by independent senators. But sometimes the independence is lost on some of these senators when they appear before to chair these committees. And I was very shocked, knowing that Ms. Agard had raised in the public domain the issue of who crafted the updated information. She identified Kamal Georges as being the senior manager of environment and reputation management, as being the person who would have crafted the updated information to pass on to the board, who then informs the minister. Why did the Joint Select Committee not ask Mr. Georges when he appeared before the committee as to why the information or how the information was transmitted. What was the timeline that was used to transmit this information to the board? Because you see, several important issues arise from that situation. And the questions that I want answered in that come to Jesus moment that Lisa Agard must have with the Joint Select Committee. Is it true that the minister read the wrong information in the Parliament of November 1st, despite having in his possession updated, accurate information as stated by former TSCT CEO Lisa Agard? Did the board of TSCT move promptly to advise the minister that he needed to correct the public record expeditiously, seeing that it was their duty to swiftly advise the minister of updated information? Why did the minister choose not to correct the information in the public domain, despite knowing that it was inaccurate, and instead the minister decided to throw the heat on TSCT's management? Was the minister aware that the office of the CEO was instructed by the board that they to make no public statements on the cyber attack? Did the board consult with the minister in the firing of the CEO and the CFO? What is the relationship between the current acting CEO of TSCT and the minister? Is it true that the acting CEO was placed into the position while he was on probation in another position in the organization? Now, these are some of the questions that has now arisen coming out of what has occurred at the Joint Select Committee, as well as the public utterances that have now been made by Lisa Agard. And therefore it comes back to the point, oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first set out to deceive. The minister knowingly, post making the utterances of denial inside of the parliament, never sought to correct the public record. And therefore we must get at the Joint Select Committee, and I saw yesterday at the Joint Select Committee the chairman of TSCT, Sean Roach. He asked that part of it be done away from the cameras and in private. I want to publicly call, as a member of parliament, as a member of the House of Representatives, where we have opposition members on that committee. I would hope that the opposition members, as well as all the members of the committee, would, one, call for Lisa Agard to appear and bear her soul come to Jesus moment at that Joint Select Committee. She must release herself from pip and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We want the whole story. And she too owes a fiduciary duty to the people of Trinidad and Tobago to tell us the whole story, to tell us whether or not Marvin Gonzalez called her in when she was being fired, and what was said to her, why she decided to exercise her contract rather than exercise her conscience. And that is the point of this entire, the crux of the matter. Lisa Agard is now exercising her conscience because she is now the political scapegoat of the People's National Movement. Because the untouchables cannot be touched. And therefore, we are also calling for the Minister of Public Utilities to be hauled before the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament. And he too must have a come to Jesus moment, because he must explain himself as to how this entire bacchanal occurred, and he is now featuring at the center of it. The minister cannot remove himself from this situation. I am further calling this morning, and this is the point that I spoke about, the chairman of TSCT saying that they want certain information out of the public domain. TSCT is a state enterprise where the majority shareholder is the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore we are calling on the Joint Select Committee to put in the public domain, whether you have it or whether you are yet to request it, or if you have not requested the information, you should do so now. We want every piece of correspondence that was crafted, whether it's by the senior manager of environmental and reputation management, whether it is from the board. We want a timeline. When was the updated information crafted? When did it go to the general manager? Whose office was it sent to next? At what date and what time did the board get the information? Who on the board was charged with the responsibility of sending it to the line minister? Did the line minister call and ask for updated information when he saw the question was filed in the parliament on November 1st? These are the issues that we need transparency on. And therefore, over the next coming days and weeks, Lisa Agard must have her come to Jesus moment. She must release herself from her contract. Because you see, contract might be about securing your financial future. Nothing wrong with that. But the issue here is that you must now bear your conscience. Because it involves 1 million subscribers and customers of TSCT, and that is the bigger picture. One must not look about self. You know, I saw on the front page of today's Trinidad Express, bodyguard for TSCT's CEO. Chairman, TSCT does not discuss or comment on security-related matters, certainly not in the public domain. To do so would be self-defeating. I also want to say to the chairman, to do so or to not do so would be self-interest. And this is what this has always been about, preserving and protecting the board, the P&M untouchables, self-interest. Everybody is looking out for themselves, but nobody is looking out for the 1 million people who have their data out on the road, who are susceptible to the attacks from criminals. They are all looking to preserve themselves. Lisa Agard only opening her mouth now because she is the fall guy or the fall lady. The minister, my hands are clean. Not a word of explanation as to how did you arrive. No, the minister is yet to deny whether or not he has received updated information. There are critical questions that board of TSCT and senior management of TSCT must answer. This saga is not over yet with the appearance of Lisa Agard and the Minister of Public Utilities and the Joint Select Committee. There must be examination. And to the chairman of that Joint Select Committee, I want to tell you, there must also be cross-examination. Because you have heard from the management of TSCT, you have heard from the board. The two central figures being the minister with responsibility for public utilities and Ms. Agard. Now, we are calling for them to have their come to Jesus moment, for them to explain, for them to bare their soul to the population. But based on what is said, there must be a second round for TSCT and their management. Because we also want to get a sense, in the interest of transparency and responsible and good governance, every piece of correspondence between management, the board, and the minister. Because we will be like a dog with a bone. We will not let this issue go. This morning, this is the most obscene and disgustingly obscene front page for former workers of TSCT. I have been raising in the public domain for over a couple of years now. Indarsingh also, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa. The retrenchment of thousands of employees at state enterprises, namely TSTT. And we were told by the stakeholders, including the government, most frontally the government, that they needed to restructure and rework TSTT because TSTT was bankrupt. and insolvent. And exactly what they did to Petrotrin employees, former Petrotrin employees, we saw the playbook where they were doing the exact same thing to employees of TSCT, WASA, etc. Today, the acting CEO of TSCT, we are told, he has a security detail that is costing this country. And I want you all to understand that it's not costing TSCT, it's costing the people of Trinidad and Tobago $65,000 a month. Some of you all don't even know where $65 or 65 cents are coming from on a daily basis to put bread and butter on your tables. But this Messiah, this colonial head of TSTT, is like a Messiah, providing some type of leadership. We don't know what it is, but apart from the perks and salary of over $100,000, this acting CEO, Kent Weston, is now costing Trinidad and Tobago an additional $65,000. The question must be asked, who made this decision? Has the board sanctioned this decision? Did the board approve this decision? Was the minister made aware of this decision or this proposal before the decision was made? Did the minister give his authorization for this expense to be made? Is there reports within law enforcement agencies that Mr. Kent Weston is under some type of threat? Has there been a threat assessment done that warrants the expenditure of $65,000? And listen, we are reliably advised that this is not just for Mr. Weston, but also for Mr. Weston's family, where security detail has to go and sit down and watch children play in parks and watch family members shop in supermarkets while blood flows throughout the length and breadth of this country, where ordinary citizens are gunned down, where their homes are invaded, where their children are murdered and raped. But you have a government that has not one word to say about bodyguards for TSCT CEO. But you know, we understand why the government has not a one word to say about this. The political leader of the United National Congress told you that just like the TSCT CEO, them too have bodyguards. So they are not interested. They are not interested in this expense being a burden to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the minister must come out. He must stop ducking and running and hiding and creating personal attacks and smoke screens. Now, I understand the minister, when you have nothing to say and you have things to hide, that you will come with personal attacks on Indarsingh and myself and Mrs. Bisessa and so on. I want to say to you, you can run, but you cannot hide. We are not afraid of any one of you. And we will continue to ask the burning questions, whether it's before the Joint Select Committee, whether it's outside here at the Leader of the Opposition's office, whether it's out there on the streets. But these are critical issues that are affecting the country. And the government has taken this approach time and time again to protect the P&M untouchables on state boards. It is a pattern, Trinidad and Tobago. It is a pattern. You are seeing it happening at Paria, when Newman George continues to sit, drink champagne and eat caviar at taxpayers' expense, go on golf with Rowley every single morning, whether it's at Mocha or Upper Intrincity. That is public knowledge. It is a pattern that has been developed by this administration to protect their own. Trinidad and Tobago, the question now remains, when are you going to take steps to protect your own? Because the government definitely is not doing it. They are not doing it at Paria, and they're certainly not doing it at TSCT. So I just want to, as I wrap up, just reiterate the 3 calls that we are making for today. 1, for Lisa Agar to have her come to Jesus moment and bare her soul at the Joint Select Committee as to how we arrived at this point, and how Minister Marvin Gonzalez is not accepting what she's saying, that she did ensure that updated information was passed on to the minister in terms of the data breach at TSTT. We're also calling for the Minister of Public Utilities to be hauled before the Joint Select Committee, because he too must have his come to Jesus moment and answer. And the final thing is that we want all correspondence from TSTT, the management, the board, and the minister to be made public. So at this time, we will move on to taking questions from members of the media. Both MP Indarsingh and I will make ourselves available. I now hand you on to MP Indarsingh, who will handle this segment.
Thank you very much to my colleague MP Padarath for addressing the issues at the Trinidad and Tobago Telecommunications Services Limited, and for making that call inclusive of the minister and all related parties to tell the truth in the interest of good governance and transparency and accountability in public affairs. You know, the Prime Minister and his cabinet, they continue to boast that they are upholders of good governance and accountability and transparency in public affairs. And we hope that the minister and all players at TSTT will ensure that this prevails. Members of the media, we now are open to questions as it relates to the issues that we have addressed today.
In terms of the Paria victims, how do you see this thing developing now in terms of compensation for the families? Is there like a procedure that is supposed to be followed at all? The recommendations have been made, or what?
Conscience.
The recommendation is very clear as it relates to what emanated at the Commission of Inquiry. The commissioners have recommended, without admitting any liability or responsibility, Paria has a moral duty and obligation to display some kind of conscience based on the trauma, how they were treated, and so on. Even one of the recommendations coming out of the Commission of Inquiry now calls for proper protocols to be established when a incident of this proportion occurs within state enterprises and within the public domain and so on. So at the end of the day, we are saying that the political will, just as how the board has not resigned, they continue to enjoy the perks of office, their board fees and so on. We have asked this morning whether the contracts of Colin Piper, Catherine Balkisoon, Mushtaq Mohammed and so on have been renewed and so on. If indeed it has been renewed, what is preventing Paria from displaying and conducting itself in a conscionable manner as it relates to fulfilling that sense of moral duty and responsibility, whatever the families pursue from a legal point of view, that is within the established judicial process of the country, and that is their right to so do.
Submit another request for Marvin Gonzalez to appear before the Commissioners Committee.
Yes, I think the Speaker of the House needs to review the original decision that was taken. So there's a process in which to raise a matter of privilege in the House of Representatives. In light of the Speaker's ruling, I don't believe that Madam Speaker would have had the benefit of the information that Lisa Agard has now placed in the public domain, and seeing that there is disparity in terms of what the minister is saying and what Ms. Agard is saying in terms of the disparity of the truth. I believe that the ruling of the speaker might have to be reviewed, and therefore, yes, it is my intention to raise it in the House of Representatives in terms of bringing Minister Gonzalez before the Privileges Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for the benefit of your attention. Both MP Indarsingh and I have raised some very critical matters in the public space and the public domain, and therefore we will continue to keep the fight. Mr. Indarsingh, maybe fortuitous, Mr. Indarsingh reminded me that Mr. Pandey used to always tell us, never retreat and never surrender. And most definitely the opposition intends never to retreat and never to surrender, particularly on issues that are impacting on so many people across a backdrop of high food prices, massive runaway crime, and a government that has collapsed upon itself. So we in the opposition will continue to uphold the oath of office that we have taken to fight on your behalf and be your voices both inside and outside of the parliament. So we thank you for your attention, and we thank the media for joining us and carrying the message of the opposition this afternoon. Thank you.